It seems like people are never short of criticism when it comes to Blizzard's popular... what did they call it again? FPS? Oh right, there was a meme once. The game has done a lot to piss its players off in the time it's been available, and they really seem to like adding to that on a regular basis. Naturally, the vision that developers have does not always align with what consumers want. And when it comes specifically to Overwatch, the game has been breeding a lot of entitlement on its own back. But why bring this up now of all times? The game is arguably in a much better state than it was a few months back, and overall, the hype still seems to be there despite the end of its honeymoon phase. Well, truth be told, my internet is being an absolute dickhead right now, and after a short conversation with my ISP, that's not gonna change for this entire month. Needless to say that it's really difficult to make videos if you can't play the game you want to talk about, because playing it and watching others play it and talking to others who also play it all contribute to the inspiration that ultimately founds the ideas for my videos. So it's not like I'm particularly angry at the game at this point in time. In fact, I'm more angry about the fact that I can't play it. But I did have to pull a video out of my ass, and preferably something I could make without needing to do a ton of research on the place called internet that is being ripped away from me on a regular basis. At any rate, I did not want to mindlessly bash the game. That is, believe it or not, rarely my goal. So instead of just bringing up things I don't like and labeling them inexcusable, I want to talk about why they are inexcusable. Spoiler, a lot of it comes down to them having done things right before, but then almost willingly decide to do things wrong in Overwatch. And those are things that, specifically for those of you who did not play Blizzard games before Overwatch, might be really interesting. But of course, we are also talking about inconsistencies in how they advertise the game versus what is actually in it, as well as how they address issues in a manner that stands contrary to the core design philosophy of their own product. All of that is just to say, this is not gonna be a rage fest. I mean, maybe a little bit, but at the end of this video, I hope that you guys leave a bit more educated than you were before. Now without further ado, let's finally get into it. Number 1 on our list is a lack of grouping features. Trust me when I say that I hate putting the most obvious thing at the start, but in the context of this video, the order does matter. Once we get to number 2, you will understand why. Alright, so what the game is lacking specifically are 3 key features: a team league, a role queue, and a guild or clan system. Now, it's easy for me to just point at World of Warcraft when talking about a role queue as well as a guild system, because WoW did all these things very right. But for those of you unaware, when participating in matchmaker supported content, you have to sign up with your role specialization. That helps the matchmaker creating a group that's actually capable of beating said content. And that makes a heck of a lot of sense, because PvE content is always the same, the designers know exactly what is required to beat said content. In fact, they specifically build dungeons and raids around the idea of having all the roles covered to very specific extents. That means that you will always fare best when running dungeons with 1 tank, 1 healer, and 3 DPS, and raids are always going to require 2 tanks and a truckload of DPS behind it. It's very cut and dry in that sense. Now, the argument against a role queue in Overwatch has been that it takes away from the flexibility that the developers want players to have. If you were locked into the tank role and your DPS were having a bad day, you couldn't just pick up their slack because you locked your role at the time of queuing up. And if they were to allow switching roles outside of what you signed up for, then what's the point of that system in the first place? People could sign up for support and still play DPS if they're feeling funny that day. But bottom line is that a lot of players would prefer this rather restrictive environment over the absolute RNG fest that we have right now. Getting 4 support mains on your team often marks doom from the very beginning. It makes playing the game, let alone winning it, so much more difficult for all the wrong reasons. Not to mention that a lot of us specialize on a handful of heroes anyway. And when it comes to the lack of a clan or guild system, no, that's kind of a joke, isn't it? A team-based FPS where actually grouping up in a full squad grants you insufferably long queue times with skill rating gains that by no means justify the effort and time investment. There is absolutely nothing in the game that ever encourages us to group up in a squad of 6. You get the maximum amount of XP with 2 players anyway. There's no separate team league where we can test our skills as a whole group, and trying to play on the normal ladder feels like a chore thanks to all the problems I just mentioned. Blizzard, if nothing else, then at least this should have been in the game when you originally launched it. Number 2 on our list is an absolutely disgusting lack of choice in the game overall, which is funny considering that the developers don't want to take away our ability to freely swap heroes mid-game. I mean, that's a key feature after all, isn't it? Let's start with the fact that there's no way for players to set up a map rotation preference. Not even a blacklist or anything, just a preference. I mean, if we level here for a second, you and I both know that a lot of players absolutely despise at least one of the game modes in Overwatch. A lot of us voiced our dislike for 2CP, others can't stand King of the Hill, and I was told that individuals who don't like hybrid maps also exist. Well, Blizzard has taken a massive number 2 on the idea of player choice. Especially 2CP proves time and time again just how flawed that game mode and its map design is. And yet, we are forced to suffer through it because hey, they spent time making it, right? The fact that we have no choice in the matter is an absolute joke. There's no standard server browser for casual play that allows us to play our favorite maps, so we are at the mercy of the matchmaker. But the lack of choice does not stop here. Remember what we discussed earlier for number 1? The fact that players would prefer a more restrictive type of matchmaker over the RNG that we have right now? Well, because Blizzard does not think it will be a good idea, they don't even give us a choice. And by that, again, they force us to bow down and pray to RNGesus in every aspect of the game. And even when we talk about cosmetics, why can't I just buy the skin I want? Why do I have to dump 50 bucks into loot boxes to hope to get it? And if I don't, well, let's spend another 20 in hopes of at least getting the currency I need to buy it directly. The fact that Blizzard gets away with taking away all control from the player, and even worse, us being fine with that, absolutely astonishes me. You know, cosmetics used to be tied to quests and achievements, but these days they are hidden behind chance. It's not something meaningless that's put behind a paywall, it used to be content. And it's not enough that they take out content to monetize it, they also have to add RNG to the mix to maximize revenue. That, my friends, is just disgusting. Number 3 brings us to their stance on social issues in the game. Now you might wonder what I'm talking about here, so let me enlighten you. Smurfs, one-tricks, and team players. They've openly stated that they don't believe Smurfs to be a problem for things that make sense from a technical standpoint, but that doesn't mean they're not a problem from a social standpoint. And the same thing goes for their acceptance of one-tricking as a practice in competitive play, as well as the fact that they never specified what exactly makes someone a team player. But one at a time, how can Smurfing be a social issue? The way the ladder has been designed, it can very quickly tell when somebody's performing above their peers, and then they award them with more SR to swiftly get them into a higher rating so they quit stomping players who are very obviously much worse than them. But from a social standpoint, Smurfs have been a big problem for the community. There are players who outright give up when they oppose a team of Smurfs because they don't believe they can win. And while Smurfing shouldn't be a problem from a skill rating perspective, fact of the matter is that players who play on a secondary account fundamentally don't care as much as someone who's on their main. Sure, they might try to win, but they won't try as hard as they would if their actual elo was on the line, and that just isn't fair to everyone else on their team. Not to mention that those players also have no hesitation to be toxic or throw games because hey, it's not their main. And even if you can weed out repeat offenders, fact is that so many Smurfs exist that it doesn't even matter. Because even if every Smurf only gets toxic like once a month, that still means that you have a very decent chance of running into players like that very frequently. When it comes to one-tricks, do I really need to explain why allowing players to be selfish in a team-based game is creating problems on the social level? They tell us that as long as they're trying, it's not bannable. But who decides if they're trying or not? If you play a Taxametra on Numbani, what exactly do you do even when you try? Whether they want to admit it or not, but some heroes just work better on certain points than others. We can't even play the game properly because rather than adapting ourselves according to the map design and the enemy comp, we have to play around people who willingly handicap themselves and subsequently their entire team as well. The idea of what makes a good team player according to Blizzard and what makes a good team player according to the community are very different. And that too majorly contributes to the mess of an experience that we get when playing competitively. Social issues do matter. If you thought that I've been talking a lot, then boy oh howdy, this must be your first rodeo with my channel. Thankfully, number 4 is very self-explanatory. They're lacking tutorials that, well, actually makes sense. That's more to say that they never teach players how to play the game properly. And believe it or not, but a lot of us who play competitive do want to play it properly. And we shouldn't be limited to having to 6-stack to achieve that. Something that, again, comes with a whole host of problems and is not exactly made easy by the game itself, as we already discussed. Like, why is the request to play the game as intended tied to extra effort? Why is having a bad experience considered the norm? Why is nobody ever taught how to play this bloody game in the first first place. I mean, for crying out loud, there are players with hundreds of hours in this game that don't even know that their payload is healing them. And don't get me started on basic concepts like contesting high ground or grouping up rather than staggering. It kinda blows my mind how easy it is to play this game wrong, how it never incentivizes playing it right, and how it does fuck all when it comes to educating the player base. And that already concludes number 4. We are having a serious education problem, my friends. And this is where it all comes together. Number 5, breeding toxicity and entitlement. You know, it's always easy to just say, hey, the player base for this game is really toxic, but rarely do we take a step back to look at why that is. And in the case of Overwatch, honestly, it kinda dug its own grave because it tries so hard to make us feel good about ourselves. I mean, you got a gold medal system that means absolute dick without context, you got a play the game system that some players still believe means doing something flashy once in the match makes up for an entire game worth of feeding, and as we just discussed, lacking a tutorial that teaches us that we're wrong is not exactly making the whole thing easier. This is the first step in blaming teammates and destroying any chance for teamwork in this team-based video game that direly needs us to work together. By clearly stating that one-tricking is okay, they also tell us that being selfish is completely alright. Just do whatever you want to do. Whether it actually contributes to a victory or not does not matter because all you have to do is try, which God knows nobody can prove you wrong about because it's completely subjective. If that was too convoluted for you, they tell us that being selfish is okay while making us feel like we're doing great when we're not, and they don't even have the decency to tell us how to play the game right in the first place, so everything is left to speculation. And then you wonder why your player base is so goddamn toxic. Seriously? I can't even feel bad for you at this point, Blizzard. Now, as much as I'm sitting here poking fun and pointing out the obvious, that's kind of the meme, isn't it? These things are so obvious and so stupid that I can't comprehend how the hell these problems have not been taken care of yet. But there are things that I deliberately left out too, like the matchmaker for example. Yes, it feels like it's made of RNG fairy dust, but I do acknowledge that with the type of game that they have created, it's not easy to matchmake this whole thing. Also something I discussed in my video called the solo queue problem, so if you are disappointed that I didn't bring it up in today's video, I highly recommend you go and check out that one. With that said, I welcome you to leave your thoughts on the subject in question down in the comment section below. While you're down there, don't forget to drop me a like on your way out if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and if you really want to help me out, hey, why not share this video with a friend you think would find it interesting? I'd greatly appreciate that. But until then, thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you all next time.